The rain poured down in relentless sheets, drumming a cacophonous symphony. On the roof of Jim's old pickup truck, thunder rumbled ominously, punctuating the darkness that stretched endlessly before him. Jim squinted through the windshield, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. He'd been driving for hours on this desolate stretch of highway, with no sign of civilization in sight. The fuel gauge hovered just above E, and Jim's anxiety grew with every mile he covered. He'd been on a solo road trip, a personal journey to clear his mind after a painful breakup. But now, as the storm intensified and the gas gauge flirted with empty, he realized he was lost in a rural nightmare. The only light in the distance was a flickering neon sign that read, "The Midnight Pit Stop." It was his only hope of finding gas and shelter from the storm. Jim pulled into the gas station, its flickering sign guiding him into a patchy parking lot surrounded by dense woods. The station looked like a relic from a bygone era, its paint chipped and peeling. Jim couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine as he stepped out of the truck. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain stung like icy needles on his face. Entering the small, dimly lit store, Jim was met with an eerie silence. The rows of dusty shelves were stocked with snacks, cigarettes, and odd trinkets, but there was no sign of life. A rusty bell above the door jingled as he entered, a sound that resonated through the empty space. "Hello?" Jim called out, his voice echoing through the store. No response. He cautiously moved toward the counter, where a flickering fluorescent light barely illuminated the room. He contemplated leaving, but decided to explore the place, maybe find a bell to ring, or even a phone to call for help. With every step he took, the floor creaked beneath him, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The back of the store led to a narrow corridor. Jim's heart raced as he ventured deeper into the building. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting eerie shadows on the stained linoleum floor. A strange, pale light emanated from the crack, casting a ghostly glow into the corridor. Pushing the door open slowly, Jim was met with a horrifying sight. The room beyond was filled with old mannequins, their faces twisted into grotesque expressions. They were dressed in torn, tattered clothing, some adorned with filthy, cobweb-covered hats. The pale light emanated from an old, malfunctioning television that sat in the corner, playing static. Jim felt a chill creep up his spine as he scanned the lifeless eyes of the mannequins, their blank stares sending a shiver down his spine. Turning to leave the room, he spotted a flickering lamp on a table in the corner. It illuminated a handwritten note that read, "Do not disturb the guests." Jim's unease deepened, but he brushed it off as a bizarre joke. He retraced his steps and returned to the store, deciding to explore further, hoping to find someone who could help him. Behind the counter, he found a small office. Its door was ajar, and the dim glow of a desk lamp spilled into the room. A dusty leather chair sat behind an old wooden desk, and the walls were covered in faded posters from long-forgotten events. Jim's eyes fell on a calendar. The date was frozen on October 19, 1983. Its door was ajar, and the dim glow of a desk lamp spilled into the room. A dusty leather chair sat behind an old wooden desk, and the walls were covered in faded posters from long-forgotten events. Jim's eyes fell on a calendar. The date was frozen on October 19, 1983. It was as if time had stood still in this eerie place. As Jim looked around the office, he found a phone. His heart raced as he picked up the receiver, but there was no dial tone, only an eerie, hollow silence. He hung it back up, realizing that there was no way to call for help. Panic gnawed at the edges of his mind. Jim needed to find someone who could explain the situation. He returned to the store's main area and ventured down a dark hallway. It led to a decrepit restroom, its tile floor slick with stagnant water. The mirrors were cracked, and the faucets dripped incessantly. Jim approached a stall and pushed the door open, revealing a sight that froze his blood. Inside the stall was a mannequin, grotesquely posed in a twisted imitation of a human body. It wore a worn and tattered version of Jim's own clothing. The realization that someone had set this eerie scene with such attention to detail sent a shockwave of terror through him. He backed out of the restroom and stumbled into another room at the end of the hallway. This one was filled with ancient gas station equipment, long abandoned and covered in dust. A rusted pump sat in the corner, a relic from a time when this place had been operational. Jim's mind raced, and a chilling thought crept into his consciousness. He was not alone in this place. Someone, or something, was watching him, playing twisted games with his sanity. He decided he had to leave. He needed to get back to his truck, no matter how low the gas gauge was. Turning on his heels, he retraced his steps, his footsteps echoing through the desolate building. But as he reached the corridor that led to the front of the store, he stopped dead in his tracks. The mannequins from the room were no longer where he had left them. They now stood in the corridor, blocking his way. Their lifeless eyes seemed to follow him, and their twisted faces sent waves of terror crashing over him. With his heart pounding in his chest, Jim knew he had to find another way out. He remembered a side door that might lead to the gas pumps. He backtracked and found the door, throwing it open to reveal a pitch-black night. The rain still poured down in torrents, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Jim dashed through the rain toward his truck, adrenaline pumping through his veins. As he reached his vehicle, he fumbled with the keys and climbed inside. He tried to start the engine, but the truck's old battery sputtered weakly, refusing to cooperate. Desperation clawed at him. He pounded the steering wheel and cursed his bad luck. The eerie gas station seemed to close in around him, as though the building itself conspired to keep him trapped.